Okay, good evening all to everyone on the chess-based server and on livestream.com Kingscrusher. We're going to be looking at some Tal games this evening, and the first game, Tal against Skuja in 1955. So Tal was playing white, and in this game often Tal plays e4 in his games, but he also did play 1d4. And this game is a 1d4 game, so kicked off with 1d4. Then we saw knight f6. Good evening, Will Sonia on ChessBase. So c4 and now d6 was played. Tal proceeded knight c3, and we have a King's Indian formation. And Tal chose fianchetto line with g3. After castles, bishop g2. So quite positional. It doesn't look like the usual hack and slay, of the e4 openings, but nevertheless an advantage for white. A small nagging advantage, one could argue. After castles e5, Tal chose here the move queen c2, which prepares often rook d1 just to put pressure on that d file. So queen c2 looks okay. Tactically it's working. There's no nasty discovery on the knight on d4 if ed at the moment. Black elects to play rook e8. So with this move we might see potentially black aiming for e4. And often, actually, we've seen in some Petrosian games c6 and d5 later, if that is going to be the case, to try and sort of overprotect this central square as a basis for a later attack. Rook d1 was played here. So tempting black. At the moment, it will be very, very risky, I think, to play e4 because of knight g5. There'll be no way for black to really defend that pawn. If we have a quick look at that. Without any d5 possible at the moment, this pawn is very vulnerable. So for the moment, actually, after rook d1, c6 was played. Now Tal plays b3, so he's still provoking black. Come on, play e4, but black's not interested. Just conserving, just keeping e5 as a strong point with queen c7. Now e4, so stopping black from playing e4. a6, as though maybe b5 is on the cards. Bishop a3, eyeing that sensitive d6 square. And it looks as though d takes and bishop d6 might actually be very unpleasant for black here. So black decided to do something quite radical, this c5 move. Okay, it looks as though d6 is not such a major issue at the moment. So Tal did play now. He didn't want to keep the position closed. He's got three options. 1, 2, 3. Which one does he take? Actually, he took the c5 pawn. After knight takes c5, now he plays b4. So he's aiming actually to undermine now black's pawn chain at d6 via c5 push. After knight e6, c5. And this looks quite good for white now because there's also knight d5s on the cards. The bishop is helping for this c5 push. e5's more vulnerable after this undermining. Okay, so it looks as though black hasn't got great position here. He takes on c5 and we have knight d5. So white potentially is going to get a huge pass pawn here after takes d6 maybe. Nasty pass pawn. Knight takes d5 did occur, e takes. But now a little trick here from black. The knight is currently protecting the queen. So why not do this little trick? Which is basically to not move the knight, but instead play c takes b4. So here it gets a little bit tactical. Tal's not interested in the queen exchange here. although that does look tempting, but with the white bishop attacked, it's not going to be such a problem, I think, for black. So actually there's an interesting move that Tal played here, queen a4. So hitting that rook now on e8. So we have two pieces under fire. But surely, you might ask, well, can't black just play bishop d7 to attack the queen? And that leaves the queen now attacked and the bishop. And if queen takes b4, then, surely black has, say, knight d4 with potentially a pleasant position. Or something like that. Maybe attacking the queen. Well, this is what happened. Queen takes b4. Okay. Which eyes d4 actually from the side. So we've got this, and this on d4. Maybe potential for d6 as well. And which also might coordinate the bishop and queen on b7 here. If there's d6. So it's potentially quite dangerous for black. Black decides to play a6 actually here. Sorry, a6 to a5, attacking the queen. Now instead of the queen moving, we have a very interesting move here. I wonder if you can spot it if I give you 20 seconds. Those on the chess base server, please try and hide the move score on these guess the move sort of tests. So just to get you more actively involved in the position, is there a great move available to white here? So 20 seconds starting from now. Okay. Anyone? Any guesses? White to play here. So the queen looks as though it's under attack. What would you play here? Any ideas? Would you just move the queen? Mustang fan, d6. D6. That's interesting, but I think you're going to lose a piece if you play d6. Because basically, takes and then, takes and then takes your... Oh, you're not losing a piece, you get d7. Actually, so not so bad, not so bad. You got a point. d6, okay. That wasn't the move played, but is there any other suggestions? That wasn't the move. A more spectacular one, actually. Okay, I think I'm going to reveal it. It was d takes e6. Temporary queen sacrifice. So the queen is taken, and now the point's revealed. Rook takes d7, and further material loss will result after e takes. So the queen goes to c3 here, attacking both bishop and rook. But black is about to lose a rook. E takes f7 check. And another rook after losing with check. But king takes e8 now leaves two rooks and pre. So what does white do? And the bishop. He has to give up the bishop. Okay. He just plays actually rook ad1. Because now, okay, he's going to play rook takes g7 if black snaps up that bishop. So material is not so bad now for white after all this. Bishop f6. Bishop c1. It's actually very good for white, the material situation, if we look at it now. Two rooks match the queen. Then we've got three pieces here versus rook and bishop. It's very good for white. But has black got this potentially dangerous asset, the b pawn, coming through? After rook takes a2, we've got a clear past b pawn. But now the king factor is coming in. Knight g5. So that introduces immediately a threat of knight e4, actually attacking queen and bishop, as well as knight takes h7, of course. Queen c2 was played, which actually threatens, of course, f2 and then mating after that on g2. But knight e4 defends f2 and attacks the bishop. Bishop moves to e7. Okay, now some more tactical decisions. White plays here an exchange sacrifice, which strips away black's king safety, brings in the bishop quite powerfully on g5. And now we see here, actually, if king e6, I think there's actually bishop h3. That looks pretty dangerous as one idea. If king f7, you can continue to bring stuff into the attack. Actually, the king decided to go to f8 here. Check. Check. And now, okay. Interestingly, this next move reminds me of the guess move quiz I saw in a chess magazine last night, where Danny King was indicating it was a game of Lalic with black losing to a hack attack, but sometimes the comment was made that the move h4 is often the move to add fuel to the attack in many attacking positions, and actually it was played here. h4 does kind of throw another wrench at black's king to loosen black's king. So in the midst of, you know, what seemed to be a forcing sequence, to play this softening, you know, blow h4 h5, very dangerous. Is there time though? Check. King moves. Rook d1, trying to get off the rooks. Knight d6, introducing now, you know, things like knight f7. If time, bishop h6 is going to be dangerous for rook d8. So here, the f2 pawn though is on. And what about g1? Black takes on f2. So white has to work quickly here. Okay. Knight f7 check. King g7. Check. King f6. And the rook's in play, of course. Rook takes d1. This looks as though it's a disaster, losing that rook. I think it's all over now, in fact, because now there's also a threat of rook f1. So that queen takes f2 wasn't a wise decision in retrospect, if we just rewind there. But maybe, you know, black's position was very difficult. The queen currently protecting the rook, and in this sequence losing that rook. And now rook f1, it's curtains ready for black. Lots of material down. He could have resigned here. It's end of game. It's just end of game. And here he actually resigned. So this shows that Tal can work with d4 and a fianchetto system, a quiet fianchetto system, if we do an overview and summary of this game. So against the king's engine defense, seemingly quiet queen c2 turned out to be very useful. Just maybe with the idea of rook d1, putting pressure on d6. Black played maybe one or two pawn moves that might not have been strictly necessary. Queen c7 seems a little bit passive. Black lost the opportunity to try and play the position quite dynamically, a la Bronstein with like e takes d4 earlier. And now it seems black's in a quite a passive state here in this position. Very solid, kind of strong position for white if we look at this. And this bishop coming here shows the bishops very nicely cutting across the light and dark squares, with d6 being a major target. Black seems to have a passive position, so, and tried to block up things or fend off, but things were just opened up here after b4 and then c5. Again, black's pawn chain under great stress. And now after knight d5, white was gaining an even mightier position, but now tactics. So queen a4, queen takes b4, and black was loath to play knight d4, possibly because of knight takes in d6, where b7 would drop, and instead attacks the queen, which didn't turn out brilliant after this temporary queen sack white netted some extra material for the queen. First a knight, then a bishop, then a rook. Ample material for the queen. Connecting the rooks, still keeping an attack on the bishop. Doesn't matter about this bishop. And now the bishop coming to c1 does support the very powerful manoeuvre knight g5 to e4, as we see in retrospect. And it didn't seem to matter about f2 being a liability. Initially it was protected by the knight. And now bringing in more pieces into the attack and stripping away black's defence with an exchange sacrifice. So positional exchange sacrifices in an attacker's hands open up more key squares, increase the vulnerabilities around the opponent's king. The king's left defend itself with these two pieces. Okay, they're aiming at f2, but the black king is all alone now. And it looks pretty terminal actually after h4. This is going to do a lot of damage to black, potentially. If any g takes, maybe they're even bishop h3 to f5 later on the remaining pawn h7. So h5 or h6 even for rook d8. Two simultaneous threats emerging after h4. Very difficult for black. Black gets a bit panicky. And knight d6 avoids the exchange of rooks immediately. And keeping this threat, that knight f7 will actually be attacking d1. And black's, it looks like a terrible blunder, but I'm not sure there's much else. So the rook on d1 now loose, and that was lost. And the rest is basically black could have resigned. So an elegant game. Let's, okay, I hope you got something from that game. Let's go on to another game. Around the same time period now, 1956. This game next. And I first saw this game, I believe, in Chernev's most instructive games of chess ever played, Irving Chernev. So, against Lzitzin, 1956, Leningrad. e4 was played. The more usual move from Mikhail Tal. So Sicilian defence. Knight f3, d6 opens up centre as usual. Standard stuff. Now we get into a Sicilian dragon with g6. So avoiding all the sort of modern tons of theory now. Actually the move f4 is less common than say bishop e3. And it's still quite dangerous. Knight c6. Now Mikhail took on c6 and played e5. This looks like a dangerous line actually. Black dared not leave the king in the centre, inviting queen takes queen, but instead plays knight d7, hoping maybe for a solid position where he can try and castle if possible, and play the position without too much risk. ed, ed. But he has to face the fact that the bishop is needed actually to support d6 here. He can't simply fianchetto it. So after bishop e3 he plays bishop e7. So is the worst over for black if black's able to castle soon and have these two central pawns and maybe b-file pressure as well to look forward to. There's a few things to look forward to here for black. Okay, Tal puts a bit of pressure across the centre with queen f3. And black responds with d5. Now white castles queenside. Bishop f6. The bishop finds a use for that diagonal. While the bishop's here, there's no dangerous check and black can then castle kingside, one would hope. And in fact, in this position, after bishop d4, black does castle kingside. Okay. Tal again uses the h pawn instrumentally now. h4. So black has to react quickly to this, otherwise he's facing a quick onslaught. Rook b8. Introduces immediately ideas of bishop takes and then maybe queen b6 hitting d4 and b2. So queen f2, handy against that sort of thing. To be able to recapture the queen to stop queen b6s maybe. Rook b4. Now white takes on f6, and after the knight takes f6, decides to kick the rook. Okay, slightly weakening maybe his queen side and the king position. Interesting move from Georgi Lzitzin here. Instead of moving the rook, he attacks Tal's queen with queen b6. Not only attacking the queen, but also threatening rook takes b2. So the endgame is forced. The queens are going to come off. Tal hasn't got any bits around the king here. These pawns are not really helping. This is a long way off. He has to exchange off queens. So a little bit of a triumph for black here on move 18. Getting the queens off against Tal is a good idea in principle, it would seem. Has white got enough advantage for this kind of endgame position? Knight a4, as though c5 might be significant as a dark square blockade. Bishop d3, stopping that nasty looking knight e4 for the moment. White could just take that off and maybe use the d file in that case. But knight h5, okay, things are under fire. The f pawn has to be protected. It's protected now with rook hf1. Nothing too serious, it seems, for black or white, but f5 might be annoying for black. Or is it? Black actually just ignores that possibility of f5. He just plays rook e7. He wants to try and dominate this e file. Doesn't mind f5 here. And in fact, Mikhail took up the invitation actually to play f5. Okay. And in fact, here, it looks as though this is tactically flawed. Surely it's tactically flawed. Surely black just plays g takes f here. Because now, if bishop takes f5, we would have knight g3, hitting the rook and the bishop. Okay, temporary pawn sacrifice for Mikhail. Doesn't want to play bishop takes f5. That would be embarrassing for knight g3. If we look at that, that's no good. What he does is just use it as a pawn sacrifice. He just actually plays rook f e1. Okay, it's double pawns. He wants to get his knight on the dark squares at some point. Black defends that e file pressure. Exchange of rooks occurs. Now this is what makes the game very surprising, this next move. Introducing an amazing concept. Very surprising move here. We've got a bishop which is kind of restrained on the light squares by its own pawns here a little bit. Mind you, you might argue f4 and then the bishop's fine again. It's got scope anyway. But these dark squares are a bit vulnerable. There's an isolated pawn here. White needs a really good attacking piece here to go and munch all these pawns. And Tal decides actually he might be able to use his king here. He plays king d2. So the king's popping out now. Maybe to munch a few pawns. Okay, is this really possible? Well, we'll see. Knight g3, the king comes out again. f4, extending the scope of the bishop. And again the king comes out to d4 now. So immediately king c5 would threaten the c6 pawn. So it starts to look, you know, this king could actually be really useful in this endgame. Bishop f5. And that introduces the idea that actually black might want to take and then play rook e2. Because the knight supporting e2, it will be like attacking lots of pawns. Okay, so before the king marches on, white might want to do something about that. Bishop takes d3 and rook e2. He plays actually rook d2, defending in advance his second rank. Rook e6, taking the king walk quite seriously to protect c6 in advance. But knight c5 now, kicking the rook. Goes to munch the h4 pawn. Okay, can the king come to the rescue again? Yes, king e5. Attacking immediately f4. And if the rook takes, maybe king d6. Okay, bishop takes d3. C takes d3, leaving the rook, just in case it's needed, defending g2. Rook takes h4. And the king marches forward again, king d6. We've got a vulnerable isolated pawn here. We've got two passed pawns here, or this one at least, on the cards. We need to create a passed pawn. Check. King c7. All we need now is king b7 and to take this pawn, and we've got a runner. A very powerful runner. In fact, in the adjournment I witnessed last night, where I thought my teammate had gone, he was 2 pawns down. It was an a pawn that saved my teammate last night. And this is another example. This is potentially dangerous, these outside passed pawns. King's over here, it's nowhere in the centre of action. This one's definitely herding pawns. This king over here. Knight f5, king b7. Blimey, it's the king quality difference. And this knight's pretty good actually as a blockader on c5, stopping this pawn ever moving. Okay. Mustang fan writes, the black king is having tea and biscuits over here. That's right, the black king's just a passive observer at the moment. Knight d4. What does this introduce? Maybe it introduces the idea of f3 to at least do something active, or is there something else? Is it knight b5? Or is it rook h2 and then f3 would be using a pin against the rook? So actually this threat is sorted out before the white king continues here. Rook f2 now. So if rook h2, actually we've got rook takes f4. Perhaps. a5, getting the pawn out of danger for a moment. And the rook snaps that f4 pawn. Knight e6. Check. And now the king, for the first time, is able to munch a pawn without too much punishment. King takes c6, walking into a seemingly dangerous discovered check, but there's no danger about it. There's no dangerous discovered check head to use, it would seem. So black just played knight takes c5 check. After king takes, we still have this potential running past outside pawn now to be created. And as well as that, d5 under fire, it's unpleasant. Rook e6, king takes d5, pawn up, much simplified position, favours white clearly now. Outside pass pawn now after b4, the king ready to herd that pawn. So it was been a very successful king march. The black king finally ready to come into battle with king e7. A little bit late. Rook d4 cuts off the black king from going over to that side of the board now. Check. King c6. The pawn is ready to be herded to the 8th rank here. Check. King c7. Again, the pawn is just ready to move forward and advance. Or is it? Rook f5. Does it stop that pawn? What can white do to liberate that pawn? Check. Pushing the black king away because this wall has been created with the white king on these key squares. King f6. Again, away from the action. And now king c6 again. And there's no check, of course. The rook is blocked. And again, b5 is now on the cards. Rook f2 coming to the rescue, maybe, it seems, from behind. And also going to snap up a pawn as well. And then maybe the h-pawn in black's dreams. Not so fast. Tal's not any rush to give up the g2 pawn just yet. It does hold black's runner. He plays g4. Why not? He's got the time to do that. And black offers h5 now. Seems like a strange idea, this pawn sacrifice. And it looks a bit desperate, but what else is black doing here? I'm not really sure. Because this king is really, you know, this is cut off. This pawn's running, this pawn isn't. So this h5 looks a bit desperate. It's taken. King g5. Finally b5, f5. Okay, we've got another running pawn. Blocked in by the rook at the moment. But now rook b4. The pawn's really ready to run now. without any rook b2 interruptions. But have we got a balancing act here with this pass pawn or not? F4, b6, f3, b7. Too late. This rook's blocking in the pawn. Too much time. End of the race. The race is already won now. Black resigned here. So this game, when I first saw it in Irving Chernev's book, The Most Instructive Games of Chess Ever Played, I was really impressed. It was to do with the king march theme, the quotation of the game. Let's look at that again. How the king can come out amazingly and be an active, aggressive piece in the endgame. So it seemed for a moment Black had solved many problems with the tactical exchange of queens that occurred in this game. After a3, instead of the rook simply going backwards and Tal maybe looking forwards, maybe to an attack of some sort, instead we saw queen b6 rudely getting the exchange of queens off, attacking that queen and also b2. But we saw something quite interesting emerged now, that Tal can play these endgames pretty wonderfully and aggressively as well, even without the queen. Temporary pawn sacrifice, splitting Black's pawns up, blocking Black's own bishop, and then just putting attention on the e file. Exchange of rooks, and now the king started its march with king d2. So who would have thought of this king march being so destructive? We're talking a configuration of 3 pieces each here, relatively safe. The king should be a stronger piece towards the endgame. There's dark squares to walk all over, as Black has a light square bishop, not able to put the king in too much trouble on the dark squares in theory. So the theoretical conditions seem to be met for a king march. But to see it in practice, also the potential counterplay had to be factored in. So there were some key moves here like rook d2 to stop bishop d3 and rook e2 from Black. So the king's march was slightly interrupted at certain moments, but continued now. And already Black is faced with major concrete issues. After knight d4, there is though the idea of rook h2 and f3. So rook f2. Black's in trouble. There's a dangerous a pawn on the cards here. So if he defended that, just king a7. And we saw now just a superior endgame position, a superior rook and pawn ending. Now, no danger at all for the white king. And the black king being kept out of the game after that check. So here it was a very easy winning rook and pawn ending, with white winning the race with ease of the 2 passed pawns. Okay. Hope you enjoyed that one. Not sure where Black could have taken the king out. Black had the problems on the dark squares, Hadgelin. He had problems on dark squares already as a prelude to that king march. The path was laid down. Okay, let's look at another game. Okay. Against Oscar Pano, Portrol's 1958, round about the same time period again, 2 years later. Tal playing white, plays e4. After e5, we have a Roy Lopez emerging, bishop b5. So standard Roy Lopez theory. d6. Now, I treat this is all Roy Lopez theory for a moment. Knight d7. Okay. d4, knight b6. Black seems to have a relatively solid position here. Bishop e3. And now black dissolves some of the tension in the centre with e takes d4. Maybe there's some pressure on e4 to look forward to later. These knights are also kind of useful. Maybe d5 at some point could be useful. But knight a5 actually hitting that bishop. Bishop c2 and now c5. Okay. The easy option would seem to be d5, but then, you know, maybe knight c4, any knight to c4, and then back to e5, bishop f6. Black would have control of e5 potentially. So instead, Tal actually keeps the pressure on this diagonal. Actually, he plays e5, extending the scope of this bishop quite dangerously, introducing maybe crude threats as well, breaking up that centre. D takes e5, knight takes e5. And now there might even be queen h5 on the cards for that sensitive h7. These knights are over here. They're not near the king at the moment. Knight bc4. And in fact h7 is picked on here now. Queen d3, as you'd expect. Okay, how does black defend this? Actually, he chose in this position f5. Seems fair enough. After bishop b3, now black turns this pawn from defensive to attacking by playing f4. So did Tal miss this? Is this going to rupture the king here? Bishop d2. Which now threatens to win a piece, because remember this knight's pinned against the king. So bishop takes a5 is an immediate threat. There's no knight c6 because this is on there. So knight takes b3. Expecting maybe a recapture on b3 because it is attacking the rook as well. So surely AB or queen takes. No, Zwischenzug time. Very, very important Zwischenzug here. The weakness of the last move. This knight's just come from there. What was it protecting? It was protecting c6. What does Tal pounce into now? He plays knight c6, attacking the queen and bishop. But surely black can give up the queen, take the rook, and have 3 pieces. And that's what he does. He takes the rook, offers the queen. Now here, if rook takes, we would have rook takes e7. And if bishop takes, then it looks quite dangerous. So why doesn't black do a Zwischenzug of his own actually with bishop f5? That's what he does. He attacks white's queen. Has Tal miscalculated this? Has black got a lot of pieces for the queen now? After queen f3, rook a takes d8. So materially, what's happened here? Let's do a material count. So 9, 14, 17, 20 against 5, 10, 18. I think I've counted that wrong. 5, 10, 13, 16, 19, 22. Black's up material in theory, but this knight's a bit stranded here, if we're honest, on a1. 21, sorry, yeah, 20. Okay, so black's up material, but the knight's stranded. With this move, he's also attacking that knight, and the bishop's actually attacked. And it's taken now, and we have 2 pieces now over here. Okay, looking strangely in the opponent's territory, looking odd. So what is there to attack here? The obvious target is g7, but for the moment d2 is also hanging. You might ask, well, hold on, there's also maybe queen g4 possibly. Okay, in fact Tal took on f4 here, And after rook takes d4, now he plays queen g4, threatening mate. Bishop g6. It looks as though black's pretty solid. Check. And this is dangerous now for black's back row, it seems. Bishop f7. Queen f5. As though possibly with queen at f5, possibly there's an idea of queen b1 to try and munch this knight. Possibly. Or is it? Is that the idea? Also there's queen takes c5 maybe. Okay. In fact, this rook is attacking the bishop anyway, so it doesn't matter if queen over here at the moment. So knight c2, offering queen takes c2, because the rook takes f4. So Tal, he's not that keen to take on c2. He plays b3. Bishop g6. And now a surprising move. A very surprising move after bishop g6. I wonder if you can spot it if I give you 20 seconds starting from now. I think this is the move that really turned the tables. Even though black's got loads of material, king's safety becomes now a major factor at this point in the game. So 20 seconds starting from now. What would you play here with white? 20 seconds starting from now. Okay. Any ideas? Black's already netted quite a lot of material for the queen. Looks like a difficult game so far, with all these Wishenzugs from both sides, and attacks and counter-attacks. So what does white play here? Anyone? Okay, someone's given an idea. Rook g7, play speed, well done. Rook g7 brings the king out, and now the continuation. Bishop h6, bringing the king out. King's being brought out here because king there is mating. Check. Okay, materially though, this is getting ridiculous, isn't it now? Queen worth 9 against 5, 8, 11, 14. So we're talking like, in effect, a whole rook down numerically in this position. But he's about to munch a knight, so it's not so bad. Just 2 units down. But pass pawn. B takes c4. Pass pawn potentially. But unfortunately the black king now is in danger after g3. Bishop e4. Threatening, actually mating white on h1 here. So Tal has to work quickly against rook d1. Check. And now king h2, not giving a chance for rook d1 because there might be queen f4 check winning the bishop. So bishop f5, queen f6 now, introducing queen g5 as a major threat. h6 stopping queen g5. Queen e5 now, threatening maybe queen e2 check, winning the knight. Nope, not winning the knight. Not sure. There's some other threats here. But queen e2 is actually, with the bishop there, is actually mating the black king. So that has to be stopped anyway. Rook e4 stops it. Check. Check. This looks like a desperate move to play knight e3. But it would still be dangerous for the white king here. If takes, there'll be rook e2 check. That looks pretty dangerous. In this position, Tal kept the pin in the position, actually. He keeps the pin on the knight. He plays, actually, King G1 quietly in this position. King G1. And after bishop G4, now he takes on E3. Okay. There's a difference now, because if rook takes, I think there's check. And if king moves, then check. If we look at this, check. This king can't cooperate, it seems. This might be the idea, or there might be something else. But the king is useful for f2 control with this king G1. Black actually decided h5 was the best bet. Now we have queen e1 threatening mate with queen f2. So takes, giving the king e4. Check. King e4. Check. Check. King e4. Because if takes, clearly there's rook f2, queen f2 check. Queen takes a6, pass pawn time. King d4, check. a4. So queen against rook and bishop is much better than before. Check. Check. Rook a2. Black's getting a bit overstretched. Check. Move the pawn. Pass pawn. But black has a pass pawn. This is the last chance now for black. c4. White's pawn's a bit quick though. Check. a6. Again, past a pawn. Very dangerous. Check. c3. Pawn race. It's going to be lost for black, isn't it? a7. After c2. Check. And not taking the pawn, but check here, means the rook is in grave danger. If the king actually moves here, for example, well, let's have a look. In this position, black resigned, but I think this is big trouble for black, I suspect. If takes, is this winning for white? Check. We would seem to be winning the rook in some variations. If king here or here, then check will win the rook. If here, then check again wins the rook. If here, then check here wins the rook. The rook's lost in this position after queen takes c2. So black resigned anyway. So that was a pretty complex game. You could say that's sort of risky game for white to play. Very complicated. The Zwischenzugs, the complexities after the Zwischenzugs that we saw in this position, after knight takes b3, starting off this interesting chain of events. So we get this material imbalance of winning the queen for several pieces, with the black king safety coming into the equation now pretty soon after this check, and now this rook sack. So interesting material imbalance. And the white king almost in trouble, but not quite. You know, king h2 also stops black getting a bit naughty as well, potentially. But, okay. Queen f6. And these checks are just... This king g1... made sure, you know, white's control of f2 was secure. So king g1, taking the time to win that knight, And now it's starting to be plain as sailing for white, creating that outside pass pawn. And it's black now that's materially in deficit. Okay. Okay. So let's have a look at another game. Okay, quite complicated. So this game against Yuri Averbakh playing white, we're going to flip the board. So d4. Mikhail plays knight f6. And goes seemingly into an Lzitzin, but switches now after knight c3 to Benoni. Forget bishop b4, he plays c5, Benoni, which was one of Tal's favourites. Modern Benoni. Takes d6. Considered kind of unsound nowadays, modern Benoni. But it was actually played in a game of that Iranian one against one of the top Azerbaijan GMs. What was his name? Iranian beat someone in a Tatar steel in this. Okay, in the Benoni, but Gashimov. So that was an interesting game with the sort of queen a4 check and then queen b3. It was quite annoying. But this is another treatment by white. Okay, it looks safe enough. Queen c2. Okay, so after queen c2, we have knight a6, bishop f4, eyeing that dangerously weak pawn. Knight b4, kicking the queen, but what's the point now? In fact, the point is revealed. There's a tactic here, even in this early position, that Tal makes use of. He plays, I wonder if you can spot it actually, if I give you 20 seconds here. Is it an obvious tactic? 20 seconds starting from now. What did Tal in this position play? Anyone? What does Tal play here? Knight takes d5? No, not knight takes d5. Although that looks tempting actually, because the white bishop is loose, as you say. So let's have a quick look at knight takes d5. What about knight takes d5, knight takes... White would have bishop b5? No, knight takes f4. Whoops. Wow. Hang on, there's a flaw here. Look. This knight's protecting that one. What do you do here, Mustang fan? Why is the white bishop loose? It's protected by the knight. Blunder. If you play bishop takes c3, b takes, and you're attacking this knight. Blunder. You can't play knight takes d5. No, I'm going to tell you, knight takes e4 was the move. Knight takes e4. It introduces a nasty pin, bishop f5. Look at that nasty pin. We've still got pressure on e2 underneath. So there's no bishop d3, knight takes d3. Okay, so knight fd2. Now knight takes d5, 2 pawns. 2 pawns. But what is going on here? Okay, he's attacking this loose bishop here. If the bishop had gone back, I think... What's the idea here? It could be just bishop takes, knight takes f5, perhaps. And again, we've got that loose bishop issue here. And if knight c3, we can just take and then take on e2. Yeah? And also if check, we've got d5, haven't we? So I think that's the idea. Does everyone agree with that? That bishop g3 is not possible. If we look at bishop g3, does everyone agree? Agree? Mustang fan, you want to go back to the knight sack on d5? But this looks crushing, doesn't it? Bishop takes, knight takes, f5. Isn't that just really good for black? This position? Or is there bishop c4? Oh there, hold on. Hold on, there's bishop c4 here. Oh dear. Alright, let's go back here. In the game, we know from the evidence of the game that this happened. Knight fd2, knight takes d5, and for some reason, in the game, white played actually bishop takes d6. Okay, so there's a key question here. A key question. What would happen if bishop g3 in this position? It can't surely be knight f6 because there's like f3, isn't there? Anyone? Anyone got any ideas here? Oh dear. Mustang fan? Anyone? Okay, I'm not 100% sure now because, you know, this f5 is refuted. Queen c8. Queen c8. Looks a bit slow. Knight c3. Okay. Queen e7, there might be f3. Ah, finally. Yes. Brilliant. Wilsonia. Brilliant. Knight f6. f3 is refuted, isn't it? d5. Good point. Good point. Yes. Brilliant. Well done. And still we've got that loose thing here. Oh, good. And if check takes, try and protect. I don't know, it starts to get a bit messy here, doesn't it? Queen takes b2 or something. Alright, so let's go back to the game anyway. In the game, so bishop h6 or bishop a6. Yes, that's another good one. Okay, so bishop takes d6 was played in the game. Knight f6, bishop f3, knight takes, bishop takes. The bishop's now loose on d6, so he's got back his material, and he's won a pawn. So in this continuation, very simple. Black's a pawn up. Okay. Queen c2. So this looks very nice for black. Control of the e-file, pawn up. Solid, putting his pawns away from the light square bishop on dark squares. Rook e5. Okay. h5. White challenges that e-file. Takes. h4. This h-pawn's quite dangerous again to try and smash white's king safety a bit. So we shouldn't be ashamed of moving our h-pawns. It's a common attacking theme to use your h-pawn. So queen f4. Very useful to have that h-pawn lurking around. g3, queen f6. Queen d1. Rook d8. Bishop g4. Tal takes now on f2. Of course, it looks to be walking into a pin. So what's the meaning of this? Actually, there's a beautiful meaning of this, that the bishop's covering g1 now. And after queen e2. Oh, this is beautiful. Oh, this is a great one. I've got to give you 20 seconds to try and guess this move next. 20 seconds starting from now. What does Tal play here? Starting from now. Beautiful move here for the attacking player to consider. Wow, Mustang fans got it. Alright, I'll say it. Deflection. You want to get on this diagonal, but you don't want f3 used. So what you do is an initial deflection. Rook d2. So if takes, you play queen c6 check without any interruption on f3. It's mating, wouldn't it? So white can't take that rook. Check. Okay, g takes h4. Queen d4. Threatening queen d5. Bishop h3. Now queen d3. Okay. Bishop g2. And now rook d1, the final move of the game. White is defenceless now on f1. Defenceless. The queen is not doing anything here. White resigned here. If check, maybe king here, and again you can't defend f1. End of game. Okay, there was a very complex position in this game. We could do a quick overview and summary. So, Benoni, we reach a complicated position after this forcing move. So knight takes e4, bishop f5. And in the game, after knight takes, bishop takes d6 for some reason was played. Okay, bishop takes d6. Let's examine just quickly bishop g3 again, just to clarify this. So someone was initially saying knight f6 would be strong. But actually, let's just look at that again. f3. d5. Hasn't white got the chance here to play takes in the queen d1? So that didn't look clear. Now, did someone have another idea after bishop g3? Was it bishop h6? That was something else mentioned to immediately threaten bishop takes d2. Is it possible? Is it really possible that that's the move? What about queen d1? No, just bishop takes e4. Is it possible that this is the move which dismantles white? Bishop h6. I guess it looks like a strong move. What about something like f4? I don't know. I think it might need some engine analysis to sort of check this out actually. After bishop g3, it would be good to get the engine analysis of this position. Anyway, so that's something for your homework. If you want to tell me next week about this position, that would be interesting. Okay, or if someone wants to put in an engine, should we just have a look at one more game and then call it a day this week? One more game? Okay. So one more game. Tal against Tolish, Riga 1958. Tal being white will flip the board. D4 again, D4. He sometimes played that. And we go into a Nimzo engine, Rubinstein variation with E3. C5, knight F3. Black increases the tension in the centre with D5. Bishop D3. Both sides castle. Knight BD7. Okay. A3, trying to grab the dark square bishop. But black introduces an attack of his own. C takes D4. And we get complications now. Knight takes D5. After E takes, A takes B4. And it looks as though... Okay, white's got the bishop pair. Double pawn, so what? Blasting rook on the A file. Knight B6, bishop B3. D takes, bishop takes E3. And this looks like unpleasant pressure. If the queens did come off, this is unpleasant pressure on the A file. So in fact, in this position, black played knight B D5, and still there was unpleasant pressure on black now after bishop C5. Rook E8. Okay, rook E1. Black took, queen takes. So if given the chance, you know, maybe rook D1 is dangerous, among other things. Also queen E5 is dangerous, maybe. So B6 was played here, bishop D4, and black plays now bishop B7. Okay, the rook comes to the D file now, threatening bishop takes F6, because D5 will be loose. Queen E8. Okay, Hagelin writes, why didn't the knight take the rook on E8? Sorry, let's rewind. Pardon me? Rook E1 was played here. Why didn't the rook take on E8? It was black's move. He plays rook takes E1 and then B6. Right, so let's just go back to the game for a sec. Queen E8. Bishop E5. Not having the exchange of queens just yet. Queen B5. Now white takes on F6. And I guess if knight takes F6, there's Queen E7 invading for F7. So G takes F6 looks like a horrible move to have to play. Queen E4. Queen takes B4. And now, actually, if bishop takes, then there's queen takes, and the bishop's protecting the queen. So knight D4, which introduces, well, lots of things. Maybe a check is going to be useful. After F5, Queen E5. And now there's a clear threat actually of knight takes f5 and queen g7. Knight e7. Protecting f5. Queen f6. Black tries to defend f7 now with bishop d5. And a beautiful move in this position actually. A beautiful move for white to really crash through now. So if I give you 20 seconds, can you spot this next move? 20 seconds starting from now. It's a real crusher. Okay, has anyone spotted this next move here? Black's a bit overloaded in this position, isn't he? It looks as though bishop d5 was a clever defense. You know, knight takes f5 does actually look quite dangerous. Let's have a look at knight takes f5. It wasn't the move played. It does look quite dangerous. Threatening mate. But remember your back row, you can't use the rook on d5, can you? So knight takes f5. Let's try knight takes f5, right? What do you play here? What would you play here with white? But if rook takes d5 here, that's mate, yeah? Oh, you play bishop takes d5. Sorry, black loses here. Does black lose here? It does look as though f7 is weak. I wonder, you know, f7, maybe knight d6. No, the rook is also attacked. There's no way. So that, yeah, that's probably that looks good. Yeah. Well, actually, there's another move anyway. So maybe there's more than one winning move. Knight c6 was played. So that's pretty cool as well. So if knight takes, there's bishop takes, and he's on a8 anyway, on f7 anyway. And if bishop takes here, then queen takes f7, and this is mates because we got the bishop and queen. So knight c6 anyway. I thought that was a pretty move. It might not be the best move. It's one of the winning moves. Surely one would hope. Knight c6. It looks pretty crushing. Queen takes b3. Check. Rook e1 threatens now queen h8 mating. So the bishop tries to interrupt the rook from the protection of the knight. Knight takes f5. Reintroduces queen h8 as a threat with the knight now on e7. And here black actually resigns. So yeah, I'm not sure what... You know, that was quite a complex game as well. Everyone agree that's quite a crushing final position. It probably was a winning position for white. Black was under a lot of pressure from that opening sequence. So there was a lot of tension in the centre. And then this strange transaction after a3, which doesn't look stereotypical. Knight takes d5. Looks kind of unusual. Okay. So materially, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. White's bishop's kind of dangerous in this position. And f7 kind of becoming vulnerable. These bishops on this diagonal and this diagonal are very dangerous. And this d5 a bit loose, a bit horrible for the d file. Bishop e5. Queen b5, bishop f6. So black was knocked out with you know, pawn sack here, knight d4, very dangerous for the black king. Queen e5. Threatening knight takes f5 and mating on g7. So queen f6, just on that f7, very dangerous. Bishop d5, and now knight c6. So black was really on the back foot from the opening and was just slaughtered with knight c6. But there might be other winning moves, as you say. Knight takes f5 looks crushing as well. It does. What can I say? I'm convinced it looks crushing as well. a8 and f7 and f5. It's too much to defend. Okay, so that was neat anyway. Knight c6. It's winning position anyway. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this week. So some tactical messes there, quite entertaining I thought anyway, some of those games. Okay, I think we'll leave it there for this week. So hope you have a good week and enjoyed this. And I'll upload it to YouTube soon, youtube.com Kingscrusher. And join in my simultaneous on chessworld.net if you want to play some correspondence chess. I'm having a big simultaneous at the moment. All you need to do is log in at chessworld.net, but make sure you put Kingscrusher as your referrer. So until next week, you know, thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed this week. Thanks very much.